Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, it's Michelle Savage, and you are here for the XBRL US webinar, Modernizing Financial Processing for Sureties, Contractors, and Bond Agents. Thanks very much for joining us. And first, I'm going to take everybody through our agenda and our speakers today. We're very happy to have with us a whole group of great speakers. We have Robert Kuhn. Robert is Vice President of Surety at Scott Insurance, and he is here also representing the National Association of Surety Bond Producers, the NASBP. We also have James Wiedemann. James is a CPA and manager at Markham. We have John Gray, Director of Technology Strategy at the Hartford in their financial services group. And we also have from the Hartford, Eric Crossett, who's maintenance tech lead at the Hartford in their bond IT area. What you see in front of you is the agenda for today. We're going to start off with the current state of financial processing and surety underwriting. And Robert is going to walk us through that. Then I'm going to touch a little bit on financial data standards and how they work. Then I'm going to turn it over to James from Markham, who's going to talk about the contractor side of the business. He's going to explain how to create standardized working process reports and provide us with a demonstration on that. Then next, we're going to turn it over to our team from the Hartford, John and Eric, who are going to provide us with a demo showing the surety side of the business, consuming standardized working process. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Robert. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Ms.
One last thing, I'm sorry, before Robert starts, I just want to mention that, as we go through the program, if you do have any questions, you can click on the Q&A link at the top of your screen and you'll be able to submit questions, and we will be taking questions throughout the program. And if you do have any kind of technical issues as we go through this, please just send us an email at support, S-U-P-P-O-R-T, at xbrl.us, and we'll do our best to get you back up and online. So with that, I'm going to turn it over once again to Robert. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. How we got to where we are today. Several years ago, the NASBP and the Surety and Fidelity Association of America started looking for ways to automate the surety industry, which is frankly woefully behind the times. And as we looked at it, there are two main sides of things. There's a processing side, which we're working with Accord to try and do some standards for that side of the process. And then, of course, financial reporting and the underwriting side, which is what we're looking at today. Looking around, we found the XBRL organization is already a worldwide data standard in the area of financial reporting. It is actually required that SEC and we open the dialogue, and I think it made a lot of sense to move forward. The one issue we ran into was the work on progress report. There are not many SEC companies that publish WIPs, but that's key to the contractor financials, and it's fairly specific to construction. So we started working with XBRL to figure out a way to create the data standards with them. In front of you on the screen, you have a pretty standard work in progress schedule that we're all familiar with. And I've pretty much seen the same thing in hard form or electronic form for well over 30 years. And it's been a standard, I think, for well longer than that. Is to go for the contractor to generate the work in progress schedule, send it to the surety or to the surety agent, which typically it was always on paper. Now a lot of times we'll get it as a PDF, which is basically a picture of paper, or if we're lucky, an Excel spreadsheet. That the surety takes to and typically it's a key data, keystrokes to enter this into their system. to get the surety's analysis, and then the surety can respond back to the contractor and their agent about what their concerns are, what questions are, etc. This is highly manual. It's time consuming. It's labor. It's error prone, and it's inefficient. When I first started my career, I had the fortune of being on a fairly large momentum. It would take me several days to do it, and then I'd take another day to find all my errors and the keystrokes. Because of that, we really think the data standards, getting a data standard set up so that we can transmit it, it's done instantly, it's done error-free, both speeds up the process and gets it much more, it's much more efficient process. So next slide. Actually, go ahead and skip to the next one. Where and get the data feed, and it goes right into their system. Their system analyzes it. It's about as efficient as you can get. The goal is really to make it so that we have both the it's a seamless process, so it never hits paper or PDFs for that matter. That's kind of the quick and dirty on this. So I want to let Michelle start talking about XBRL, what they do and how they do it, and then where we're going. We'll go into the rest of the webcast. Michelle.
Sure. So what we're talking about here is, as Robert was explaining, is making some fundamental changes simply in the way that data is collected from contractor to surety. And we see the benefits being for the surety to eliminate the manual processing. Just take that out of the equation completely and reduce the need to review data. Because the data collection process is not really where sureties are adding value. They're adding value in the analysis that they perform and the credit that they're able to provide. So we want to just get rid of that data collection altogether. And for the contractor, we see the benefit as providing much faster response time from the surety. And so we see this as beneficial on all fronts. So we'd like to tell you a little bit more about who's involved in the program that we're talking about. As Robert may have mentioned, that we have had this pilot program going on for, I guess, a little bit over a year now, and we have a number of sponsoring organizations. We've got a number of sureties that are involved: AIG, Liberty Mutual, Travelers, Zurich Insurance, and actually, most importantly, what we're going to be talking about today and viewing today is the Hartford. The Hartford has joined this program, and they're going to provide a demonstration to show how they're able to bring that data in automatically. Accounting firms that are involved are Markham. We also have industry groups such as the NASBP, and we have additional sponsoring organizations among the software providers. And some supporting participants are SFAA, CFMA, the FASB, SICPAC. So a lot of different people from the industry have seen this as a problem and something that they want to correct. Data standards are defined are designed to really lower cost, to increase accuracy, and to make data more timely. And basically, data standards need to be very clearly defined to the creators of the data, the intermediaries that work with the data, and ultimately the end users. And they can make that financial data computer readable. They can make facts that are reported clearly defined and make the data available on a much more timely basis. It's really similar to a paper document with data points embedded in it and transforming it into computer readable information that can be automatically extracted by a computer and understood. The XBRL financial data standard, as Robert was explaining, was determined to be the best choice for this process for three reasons, really. One, because it's a free, open standard. There are no licensing fees associated with the use of the technical XBRL specification, because in order to move adoption forward, we want to make it as easy. It's uniquely suited for financial data. So it's uniquely suited for financial data. Let me explain that a bit. basically, XBRL is designed to take a data point and embed information in it so that you understand what are the reporting periods, which can include moments in time, periods in time. What are the decimals associated with it? What's the entity being reported? What are the units of measures used? So it's uniquely suited to report that kind of financial information that we all need in the working process report. It's also a global standard. XBRL is used in 60 countries around the world. It's used by over 10 million companies, both public and private companies, and it's been adopted by over 100 regulators around the world, including the SEC here in the US. So in the US, public companies all have to file their financials to the Securities Exchange Commission in XBRL format. And every bank has to submit their financial data to the FDIC in XBRL format. So there's a whole infrastructure of software tools to create XBRL data, to extract XBRL data, and to analyze XBRL data. And so that means there's a competitive marketplace of tools that the surety industry and the contractor industry can take advantage of. So let's take a look again at the WIP report that Robert showed early on. We look at this and we know, looking at one particular data point, we know looking at this value of 12,113,470, so we know a lot of information about it by looking at it with a human eye. But to a computer, this value has very little information in it. It really means nothing. What XBRL does is it takes the characteristics of that data point and embeds it within the data point itself. So that when this value, this reported fact, is received by a computer, it automatically knows all the attributes of the information. It knows that it represents ABC Contractor as the entity. It's for a particular contract number. It's in US dollars. It's in millions. It's for a particular time period. And it also represents earned contract revenue. And that earned contract revenue has a label, and it also has a very clearly defined definition. So all of those components help the computer understand what it's working with. So that gives you a little bit of background on the XBRL standard itself and why it was chosen for this application. Now I'm going to turn it over to James Wiedemann at Markham, who's going to tell us a little bit more specifically about the contractor side. So what we're trying to represent to you today is kind of from the beginning to the end, how are we going to enable that straight-through processing of getting the data from the contractor straight through to the surety without the need to rekey that information in between. So James, I'm going to turn over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, hello. Basically, one of the biggest issues that we experienced in this, or that we are experiencing in this, is basically this all sounds good, but how hard is it to get information into the system? So what I'm going to show you is basically how it would be done from the contractor side or from the accounting firm side that would ultimately be sent over to the bonding company, which then the Hartford will walk through how that gets uploaded into their system. So if you see here, the contractor basically information in a whole assortment of different manners. They may use a system that's very complex, and we have some of those people represented on this call today. They may use one of the tools that I'm going to show you shortly is a tool from Altova, which is one of the software companies that's represented here. And this is one way that we can get the XBRL data out. But going forward, what we would hope to happen is that some of these companies with their different accounting software basically embed an option inside of there, which would be able to export the specific information needed into XBRL right away. So at the end of the day, that could be an add-on in the software package that they can purchase. They basically would click a button and it would send it over to the bonding company. But the Altova tool that I'm going to show you would basically help the accounting industry, because a lot of times the contractors will send their information to somebody like me. We'll work with them to see where the numbers should be, and then we'll send it back to them. They'll ultimately send it off to the bonding company. So Michelle, if you want to let me take control. All right. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see my screen right here. This is basically the NASBP WIP template. So what I did was I basically just put in, personally, I am not by any stretch a genius when it comes to technology. So take that for what it is. I was able to do this the first time through, get everything into the Altova tool in just a little bit under 5 minutes. So if you think about that, I'm only showing 9 contracts here, but I could be showing 1 million contracts. It would take not 1 second longer than that. So as I go through this, I'm going to try to go a little slower just to show you what exactly I'm doing, but it's basically as simple as that. So using this tool, this is an Altova tool. It's an add-on into Excel. Basically, you'll get this little whip add-on. All you would do, click Insert, and it's going to pop up a whip that looks like this. Now, there's a lot of information in here. Everything in blue is basically information that you need to enter. Everything in black is information that we don't need to enter. It will be a formula-driven number. A lot of this information your bonding company may not specifically want. They may want to know the start date and end date. If the more information they need, this is set up to give them, but they may only want certain information such as contract values, billings to date, costs to date, and so on. So these are certain things that you can add. I'm not going to show you adding this, but I will show you where it ultimately would get added. So I'm going to hide that, and there's a little button for completed contracts. I'm going to click that just so that we can have everything shown. There's this little report pane here. Basically on this data mapping, this is where you would ultimately build the whip. So all of these identifiers is what you need to fill out. So contract identifier, all you do, click, I go to my open whip. I'm gonna highlight all of my job numbers. Simple as that. Contract name, same thing. You go back over, highlight all the contract names, you're done. Start date, end date. If you have this information in your whip, you can put that in. You would do the exact same thing. I'm not going to show that for purposes of this. Contract revenue, same thing. You're going to come back over, estimated total costs, highlight all of those, click OK. Now, revenue earned to date, you can see that that's a black formula, so you don't need to enter anything in there, but you will need to enter the cost to date. So if we go over here, cost to date, find that. Enter. Gross profit, same thing. It's a black formula. You don't need to enter it. It'll be calculated for you. So you're going to need contract billings. Come back over here. Those will be filled out, percent complete, costs in excess, billings in excess. This will all be calculated for you. The only other thing you'd have to fill in is revenues. So if we come over and we say, all right, this is prior year revenue, current year revenue, highlight that, click OK. Then you're going to do your costs. You come back over, cost for the current year, highlight those, click OK. So now you've populated your in-process schedule. All you would do now, click Apply Value Mapping, click OK. All of that information that we just saw on the other tab is now populated on here. Similarly, if you had a miscellaneous line on your whip, you would do the same thing, link it to where that information, contract name. Now you would say, what's our revenue earned to date? Come back over, get your contract revenue. Costs incurred to date, come back over, cost to date. All right, before the start dates, so any revenue earned in the prior year, so you'd come over, revenue earned in prior year, process tab are being carried over. Next thing you would do, you would just click validate, and it would tell you if there's any errors, and then you hit export. You hit export, you tell it where you want it to go. Once you do that, it's as simple as that file is then ultimately what you would share to your bonding company. So as you can see, that was very quick. And one of the things that you'd want to know next is, okay, I missed a job. All right, if I need to add a job in here, $3 million contract, I have $1 million of cost to date, and I have 1.5 million left to complete it. And let's just say that my billings to date is $1 million. So I just entered all of that. Now I say, oh, do I have to relink all of this? Click Apply Value Mapping. You're going to see that that pops right in to the whip once you've mapped it. If for any reason that you insert that new row and it doesn't happen, all you'd have to do is come over here to where you've identified all these items. And you would basically just, if it went down to row 25, you would click.
Right. James, thanks very much. Just a couple of questions for you. So just to confirm, and I'm going to come back and share my screen again here.
Okay.
A sec. Okay. Just to confirm, this is a one-time mapping, correct? So that basically, if
case scenario, if for whatever reason something got corrupted, we're talking another 5 minutes every, let's say, quarter or however often you have to give it, but chances are it would be the same. And one of the things that we are working on with Altova is this NASBP template, trying to make that a default template inside of this mapping. So that's something that we're actively working on. So that way, if people use this NASBP template and use the Altova tool, ultimately it would automatically link up and you'd be good to go from there. So that's something for the future that we can look to do with other software providers as well.
Great. Okay, and then as you mentioned, we know that contractors create the working process document, any of their financials, in lots of different ways. They may work with a software provider, they may create it themselves in Excel, they may have their accounting firm do it for them. And our goal with this program is to give them lots of different ways to create the XBRL data as well. So, if you use a software provider today, that software provider can create an XBRL enabled module of their software. That's one of our goals. And then this Excel spreadsheet is another way of doing it. So the idea is to make it as easy as possible for contractors to create data in this standardized format. So we're very excited about this. And James, thanks very much. We really appreciate the demonstration. Do you have any further comments that you want to make on that?
There is one question. So are you requiring contractors to purchase this Altova tool to do this? I believe that the Altova tool, you do have to purchase that, but as we said, this is one option of what we're hoping to be many in the future. So at this point in time, yes, and I don't off the top of my head know what the fee is associated with the Altova tool add-in, but that's something that can obviously be discussed between the company and ultimately the surety. If it's going, I can't imagine it being very expensive, but it would ultimately save everybody time in the long run. So that's a case-by-case decision that you'd have to make. And then also, depending on the relationship with an accounting firm that you have, you could also, if they give the whip to, let's say, a Markham or any other accounting firm, we could ultimately have this tool, and then depending on where the independence line is drawn, so the level of service that you're giving to the people, we could ultimately get the information into the XBRL format for them and then send them that link that would be able to then be sent to the bonding company.
Right. And right now Altova they have a free trial, like a 30-day trial of their days of, making this happen. So with that, I want to thank you, James, very much. And I'm actually going to skip over this next slide, which had various questions on it. And we're going to go straight over to the surety process. And so now we're going to start a conversation with Eric Crossett and with John Gray from the Hartford about what they went through to begin, consuming the XBRL data in standardized format, or the WIP data in standardized format. So, John, maybe we could start with you, and maybe you can help us understand what is the current process at the Hartford to bring the working process data into your system.
Sure. Good afternoon. And first of all, I just want to say thanks, Michelle, and everyone at XBRL, and Rob and Jim for also participating on the call. Also appreciate the work that SFAA, Joe, and Dave at the NASBP have done to support this, as well as all the other carriers and agencies and brokerage organizations. And probably most importantly, thanks to everyone that's on the call for taking the time to learn about all of this work that's been going on. I think it's some great work, and it's been a great collaboration of really everyone in the industry. So to touch on, the current process, it's really, the next and the kind of final steps of what Rob mentioned earlier on in the call. So we as the surety, as part of our underwriting process, if you're doing any sort of contractor or any Any commercial performance obligation where there are multiple projects, we would require as part of our underwriting process a work in progress schedule or a series of schedules over time so we can see history. Those would come to us from the contractor, from the contractor's accounting firm via the agent and broker to us. And again, as Rob said before, they either come to us usually in a PDF format, and if we're lucky, they come to us in an Excel format. At that point, there's usually a cursory overview of the projects that are on that WIP statement. Then either an underwriter or a service representative at the Hartford would take that information, and we start to key it into what is our internal proprietary system. And there's a WIP module to that, in the same way that we enter financial data for contractors. And we would enter that data basically line by line, by project by project. The system performs certain calculations. Other pieces of data are just purely entered in. They then kind of go through the list. They, one by one enter each project. They save it. That information then feeds to, our reporting and analytics tools. It feeds into the credit model that we use in order to underwrite. And then at that point, the underwriter, carries on their way in the underwriting process. For example, if it's a new piece of business or a new account that they're looking at. On the renewal side, there's some sort of expectation of that account coming up for renewal for their line of authority on the account based on the credit that we've given them. And there's the expectation that at least on an annual basis that we would get this information. But really we would seek to get this on a more than annual basis, biannual, quarterly, whatever it is, so that we can continue to see the status of how that contractor is performing with respect to their whole portfolio of jobs, but specifically with those jobs that we, the bonding company, are providing credit for.
And John, what do you see as the biggest challenges? Like you said, you'd like to do this on a more frequent basis. Why don't you? What do you see as the biggest issues with the process today?
No, absolutely. There are a lot of challenges, and I think there are challenges to the process end to end, both from where these statements are generated and then ultimately, when they're consumed. Ultimately we as the sureties are the consumers of this data, of these statements. Now, the primary challenge is the amount of time it takes, entering the project information, entering contract price, gross profit, things like that, all of the data fields that comprise a WIP schedule. Another challenge is a translation of data on that schedule. So we've all seen different WIPs, and it depends on the contractor, it depends on the accounting firm of how that data gets to us. Can be named different things. So as we have, especially on the service side, if we have staff that are less familiar with these schedules, it becomes a training issue of really bringing people up to speed from an underwriting and a training standpoint of how they're supposed to read and interpret the different columns of data that are on a WIP schedule. So that itself becomes a challenge. It becomes a challenge from a timing standpoint, meaning we get these schedules in, especially on an annual renewal season, and an underwriter could have, using an example, 50 accounts that they underwrite in their book, 40 of which are on an annual 12/31 renewal schedule or financial schedule. Potential delayed of accessing credit to that end client, it results in inaccurate information that we make our underwriting to the right. It can be small. If they come in as PDF, this could be multiple iterations of something being printed and scanned in. It can be hard to read, hard to interpret what those numbers actually are. So all of those really are, kind of the primary challenges that we have.
Okay. And
effectively, it's immediate access to that information and to that data. So as I said before, we can, especially on kind of those annual renewal cycles, if we have delays in when we enter that data, that's effectively eliminated because this all can instantly be uploaded into our system. We have much more frequent and regular access to that data, especially as it feeds into how we provide credit and analyze that credit for our contractors. It entirely eliminates any sort of error issues. It allows us to now go from call it on average, an annual basis of collecting this information and entering this information to basically whatever frequency we can get it from our contractors and from our brokers. If they're producing this information on a monthly basis, there's no reason why we can't. But it really enhances our ability to get better access to information, to have better turnaround time for underwriting and credit decisions to the broker and to the ultimate.
Transform your process to bring in the data in an automated fashion. And my next question is really, how long did it take you to incorporate these standards, and what was involved on your part? And then we're going to show a demonstration of actually how that works.
Hi, this is Eric Crossett, and when we first started looking into importing the data, our first challenge was just finding the consistency in naming, and that was one of the big benefits that we found with the standard. Was when we were looking at importing Excel spreadsheets directly from different suppliers, the column names were all over the place, so you had to use fuzzy logic to try to guess which bit of data you were importing. So what was nice about this was, since we already knew what the standard naming was, it was pretty straightforward that we would just identify the chunk of data from the metadata and map it directly in what's being entered manually. And we just took that and mapped directly from the data in the file based on standard naming right into those separate properties. And the whole process of actually doing that mapping took about 8 hours. So it really, it made it very, very clean to pull it in. And then that way in the future, when we have different sources of the data, if everybody maps it into this consistent standard, then it's no effort on our part to pull that data straight in, because we've already done the conversion at this point. But just me, we already had all the objects set up, so we already had the back-end database and all the data models. So that was all pre-existing. What we needed to do was be able to a one-time mapping, and then testing out the ingestion of the files to make sure that everything was mapping correctly.
Great, and the mapping and the names were really drawn directly out of the work in process taxonomy. And just so our audience knows what that taxonomy is, we were working with the working group that's been involved in this pilot, actually developed that set of data fields and definitions for those data fields, things like contract revenue, profits, and costs. We basically developed those definitions so that then when you were doing the mapping, Eric. Okay, great. Okay, well, I think that gives a really good sense. And as I said, if people do have questions, just click on the Q&A link. But now I think we'll just go straight into the demonstration. And Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you. And just so everybody knows, this.
So here we have our blank whip screen, and normally when our users would enter the data, they would just tab through all the fields and enter in the data. And now that we've got the standard, you just go and you select the file that you want to bring in, and then click import, and you're done.
Yeah, so I'll just type in here. That probably would have been a 15 to 30-minute exercise for an underwriter or service individual based on their level of experience that Eric was able to accomplish in about 3.5 seconds. And this is live. This is in a mock-up demo. This is actually in our QA system. The only thing that's different here from our actual system is we've taken out some of the headers and other calculations and things like that, some of the more proprietary items, but it's live, it's working. That's actually now stored in our database, accessible if we wanted it. We could report off of it if we wanted to. We could use it in our credit models for this particular account.
And the file that you brought in, Eric, is that's actually the same kind of file that James just created using that Excel add-in. So that whole process of James creating the XBRL document using the Excel add-in through to actually pulling the data in, you can see that is literally straight through processing. It's just taking the data directly from the contractor directly into the Surety system with no need to rekey, no humans involved in that process. Okay, maybe, do you want to do it again just to show everybody, make sure we got it? It's it goes so quickly, it's hard to sort of see the impact, but it is pretty instantaneous. There you go, great. John and Eric, is there anything else that you wanted to say about the process, about how this worked?
Different options as far as how to consistently get the data into the system, and this definitely solved our issue. So I'm looking forward to having everybody play with it, because we have a lot of people that were really hungry for this ability, and we've been wanting to give it to them for quite a while now.
Absolutely. Items, as Eric mentioned, we've tried and we've had conversations about exploring solutions internally, but we've always come around to this idea of, to do optical character recognition to pull the data off of the PDF, depending on the format, depending on how clean the file was. There were issues there. That didn't even account for the different naming conventions of columns and what things were called, which that wouldn't solve for. There still would be human interaction there to identify the appropriate names of what we were actually pulling off of the PDF. And even with an Excel model, you're still doing a lot of copying and pasting. You still have some of those naming conventions. What we really liked about this, and where we're really now pushing for this industry solution, is it solves for all of that. All of those things that were potential issues are all now completely non-issues.
That's great. That's great. And I think that you both articulated, some of the major issues that you had in the whole data collection process really clearly. So thank you. This is really helpful, and we appreciate the time you spent in determining how to take this on. So I'm going to turn it back over now to Robert, who's going to talk about ongoing outreach efforts.
Very, very efficient. Hartford's demonstration showed, I think, about 13 jobs. To do 300 or 500 jobs would have taken not any more time enough to notice, to process it. So it's very very quick, efficient, and easy implementation. Where are we now? We're kind of at the point of, if you build it, will they come? Kind of, are we at the chicken and the egg deal? So we're trying to educate you, surety software providers, contractors, CPA firms, anybody that is in the data, either in the creator category as far as financial statement. Think about what you see when you go to Edgar online and pull down a financial statement that the SEC's received from a SEC regulated company. All of that data standard is all there. It can be used immediately as soon as it's implemented. We're not recreating the wheel. We're just expanding it, making it a little bit larger. So right now we're in the process. This is kind of our first live demonstration for the process and what's used. We have we're trying to reach out to show people what it's about, how it's used, hopefully to bring them on to start looking at it, to implement it in either the consumption side or the creator side. I think the next step will be publishing some case studies and showing some of this in paper form. We're also at the National Association of Surety Bond Producers annual meeting in April. We'll be having another demonstration for agents and sureties that are in attendance. We'll also be having a demonstration at the SFAA annual meeting in Washington, D.C. As you can see, you can also get more information, some of the questions that have been asked. Right now, I think we've talked about it. Told us the tool we have handy. It's not the only tool. Hopefully, on the creator side, we'll have that process we'll get some people interested in generating the export function for the work in progress and financial statements to go out to agents and sureties. Right now, anybody that has the Altoba tool or one of the other options that may be out there can do the mapping. It doesn't really matter.
Robert, should we go through some of the questions that we received?
That's what, yeah, let's go ahead and
I'm just looking at them
that.
here. Okay. The question is, are there plans to do a similar project to get balance sheet and P&L statement information from a contractor's financial statements delivered to the surety, so the surety does not have to input this as given information when analyzing the financial statements? Absolutely. You know, that's something that the work in process document was tackled first, because it was a good kind of finite project to take on. The financial statements in whole, much of those data fields are already available through the U.S. GAAP taxonomy, because as Robert and I both mentioned early on, you know, every public company today has to file their financial statements for U.S. GAAP reporting to the SEC in XBRL format. So all of those data fields are available and ready to be, you know, repurposed for contractors as well. So yes, that's another area that we would love to focus on next, because that would kind of close the loop and make it much easier for everybody to be kind of speaking the same language and getting the data in an automated fashion. Let me look at some of the other questions here.
One question there was the CFMA involved? And yes, they were involved. They helped provide feedback early on in the process as we were developing the data standards and defining all the fields in which the XBRL data export. Any bank, creditor, or financial institution that, or any other person that or entity that uses financial data from a contractor could potentially benefit by the use of these standards.
Exactly. Another question for the Hartford actually is, how is the data received for specific accounts? Can you speak to this process in more detail? How do you get information? Eric, you might be on mute. Okay. Well, I can speak to how the taxonomy is structured, and which is basically how the information comes in, mapped to a specific contractor, and then within that contractor to a specific project. XBRL has something called dimensions, so you can actually say, I want to see, you know, this contractor, and I want to see the 50 different projects that they have ongoing, and you can get the data point for, you know, for cost or for gross profit or for revenues, specifically for a contractor and for a specific project. So it all really comes out of that tax definitions is really, you know, part of that taxonomy. So that's how that mapping takes place. Okay, and just other questions. How do you deal with a WIP that is in PDF format? If it's in PDF, you know, that's just a flat file. It's basically as Robert said, consumed, but that's something that is doable as we demonstrated here. Let me just look at some of the other questions we have. Let's see. It says one question is, the agent or the surety could, every time they send, you know, and then, you know, create an Excel spreadsheet with the add-in and then provide it to the contractor, and the contractor could just key in, you know, any updated information that they need to. And then that will be, the surety would then be able to automatically generate that XBRL document